Zombies. Video games. What do these things have in common? That's right, speed. Welcome to the cool kid party, where you've only been invited so that Tanner can swipe your ADHD meds while you're distracted. That's right, Jessica didn't really want to hear you talk about Bloodborne lore for half an hour. You've been played, and now everyone is going fast, and you're being left behind like the fidgety little freak you are. What the heck is this intro? We're all pretty used to fast zombies in games at this point. A lot of the biggest zombie games seem to feature them, or at the very least, slow zombies plus some special ones. And while they haven't totally taken over, it's easy to see that the balance has shifted since zombies were a more novel concept 20 years ago. Project Zomboid made a splash earlier this year when the game's overhauled Build 41 and multiplayer were both released as the new stable build. The promise of being able to experience the great game that they had in Build 41, but now with friends, enticed tons of new players, many of who discovered the game from different content creators who had given it their attention around the time. But this game was different from many contemporary zombie games, and not just because of how deep and intricate of a survival game it sought to be. These zombies are slow. At least they are if you play in the game's default settings. If you're trying to clear out in advance of a colonoscopy, then maybe the game's sprinters are for you. But for most players, they'll be surviving against zombies that their character can generally outpace at just their standard walk speed. And it's not that the slow zombies on their own are such a unique twist on the formula, but this game is able to be really tense and engaging despite the less intense zombies. So what was it that made this game stand out and interest so many people? I was not at all surprised to learn that the game's creators are big fans of George Romero's work, like Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead. These movies are widely regarded as one of the major pieces that built up the modern image of the zombie. And in the developer's own words, Project Zomboid aims to recreate the feeling of his movies. Romero's movies, at least the ones I've actually seen, feature slow zombies. They manage to be compelling, intense movies not because of the zombies themselves having any extraordinary abilities, but because of what they represent. That being an ever-present danger that's just waiting for you to slip up so it can overwhelm you. One zombie doesn't need to be able to kill you by itself. It's about the horde and their persistence. So it's clear where their inspirations lie, but how do they go about creating this feeling? Something that I think really illustrates the development philosophy behind Project Zomboid is a page on the devs forums where they list commonly suggested features and if they'd like to possibly add them or not. The things that are definite no's tell you a lot about the vision that is guiding this game. Some of these make you think they're here because people just kept persistently asking for them, which for some of them maybe raises a little bit of concern. But there's other entries that feel like they'd be there no matter how many people asked about them. Things that are so key to the game's core experience that the devs never intend on implementing them at all. The most significant ones to my mind are military aid, overpowered weapons and vehicles, respawning and quick saving, unlimited or large amounts of ammo and weapons, zombie camo or zombie guts as a disguise, and especially important are an ending or any game over other than death, an immunity, and a cure. These decisions can tell you everything you need to know about the type of experience that the Indie Stone wants this game to be. It's important that you're never too powerful, never completely safe. You're not a badass action protagonist, you're just a person. Your strengths are balanced by flaws, and those strengths can't guarantee your survival. And that's crucial because any mistake could be your last. A scratch can mean infection, and a bite always does. Infection is death, and death is the only ending that the game has. Your character is gone, and you can only hope another survivor is able to make better use of whatever base you set up than you did. You can be that next survivor. You can kill your old zombie and try and pick up where they left off, albeit losing the experience and the skills that they had built along the way. Just like in a Romero film, the zombies are roughly as deadly as you are careless or impatient. Small groups can be safely dispatched with care, albeit slowly. Bigger groups can be outpaced with a walk, presuming you aren't injured. You can move slowly and quietly, but no matter how careful you are, they're always there. The danger never goes away, and getting comfortable can be just as dangerous as getting impatient. Just saying it's about patience and caution may make it sound easy to do, but it's more complex than that during the moment-to-moment play. You're always judging risks and trying to balance slow carefulness against getting things done faster. Oh, perfect. A misjudgment can lead to a downward spiral. If a horde is tailing you and you panic and run, you can waste all your energy and become slow. You're no longer able to outpace them, only maintain your distance. I've lost count of how many of my characters have died like this, perpetually tailed by zombies that I'm too exhausted to fight or get away from, until eventually I turn a corner or I push through a tree straight into a single zombie that I don't have the strength to really fight off very well. If I'm lucky, I get them off me before the crowd catches up, but then I'm just doing the same thing as before, except now I'm bleeding too, and I can't stop to bandage my wound. If I'm not lucky, then the group tailing me has caught up, and I'm just being ripped to shreds by a crowd. This brings up another crucial aspect of the game that engages players, your character's needs. It's like if the protagonist of a Silent Hill game was a sim. The game uses survival needs to apply steady pressure on you to keep working, but also punishes mistakes gravely by making any risk into one that has to be taken carefully. In addition to eating, drinking, and sleeping, you need to take care not to let yourself slip into boredom and eventually depression, on top of the need to keep the stress and anxiety from getting to you. And just like food and water, the things that help you relieve these conditions are a limited resource. Out of books to read while you're hunkered down inside for winter? I guess it's time to start drinking. Ah, shit, I'm low on food. I do remember leaving a lot of canned food behind somewhere. It's only a short drive away. And I guess there's no other drivers on the road. Who am I endangering? Oh. You need to take risks to meet your needs, but every neglected need can also be a risk, making your character slower, weaker, or reducing their awareness. Even time itself is a resource that you need to manage. If you keep staying up late, it'll affect when your character gets tired and mean that you have to choose between making trips during the day well tired or rested but in the dark. Or you can set aside a day or two to get your character's schedule back on track, or use up some of your sleeping pills, if you have them at all. But setting aside time for things like that can be a risk because at some point the water and electricity will shut off and you need to make sure you're ready when it does. And if you play one world for long enough, then you have winter to worry about. You'll need to either stockpile enough non-perishable food to brave it or farm fish and forage enough food to freeze ahead of time. And have you noticed how much talking I've done about things other than the zombies? I think that in and of itself highlights how interconnected the different parts of this game's experience are. Every individual system contributes to that overall experience. The zombies pose a serious, punishing, and ever-present risk. Taking care of your needs requires you to brave that risk, and even making efforts to mitigate the risk are themselves risky, and you can never be entirely safe. It's a very particular experience, and I think that the Indie Stone's dedication to being true to that experience is a big factor behind why the game caught on for so many people. The other one being the great execution on those principles that the game's big Build 41 update was. The great work their team has done in bringing the vision to life is just as important as the vision itself, if not more. And one of the best parts of that vision is that if you disagree with the execution of it in some way, the game's custom sandbox mode lets you tweak all kinds of settings to get the right version of that experience for you. You can tweak factors like the rate of experience gain, loot spawns, zombie density, zombie respawn rates, and actually even the infection itself. I've played with zombification turned off and still had a really good time because the mundane infection from a bite can already be a punishing setback, and getting ripped apart by a crowd is pretty deadly on its own. If you manage to survive for a long time and you start to get bored, you can try adding more instances of the helicopter event, which I haven't even gotten around to talking about yet. Usually about a week or so into the start of the game you'll hear a helicopter overhead, but so will every zombie within a few blocks of you. And that dickhead piloting that thing seems to be more interested in following and watching you than whether or not you even survive. Some of my most memorable experiences in this game revolve around this event because it usually happens while you're just starting to get yourself set up, and it forces you to plan and act on your feet to keep yourself alive and keep your base from being left overrun. Adding more occurrences of it can be a great way to put your long-term setup to a serious test. And on top of all of that is the game's vibrant modding community, offering to enhance and expand the game even further. All in all, this is a game with a strong vision, and with a team that's seriously dedicated to achieving that vision. The game's very first release was about a decade ago, and they've been working on turning it into the ultimate zombie survival game ever since. Even now they have big plans for future content before they consider the game finished. I'd love to see them win Steam's Labor of Love Award later this year. I honestly can't think of any game that deserves it more. If you haven't tried this game yet and any of this sounds interesting to you, I'd recommend it. It's $20 on Steam or GOG, and that's a pretty good deal for how much time you can sink into this game. I have a few tips for you if you do. First, go to display settings and change aim outline to any weapon. This will make melee combat feel better and more consistent. Also, go to accessibility settings and check the box that says resume normal speed when timed actions complete. This makes it so that if you're doing slow actions like reading a book or resting, you can fast forward and it'll automatically jump back to real time when the action is completed. As for the difficulty settings, Survivor's probably the best one to start with to get a feel for the game, and then you can adjust from there. In terms of starting traits, there's some generally agreed upon no-brainers, but there's also a lot of different opinions of what else is most worthwhile. You can look around online for what people have to say about them, but this is my current general starting setup. I generally prefer the underweight traits to the overweight ones because you can gain weight way faster than you can lose it, and food is pretty plentiful in fridges while the power is still on. If the choices seem too daunting, just start unemployed and use the extra points it gives you on whatever sounds nice and experiment from there. And lastly, this game is punishing. It's not a good idea to get too attached to one character, but you probably will anyway. That's okay, and losing a lot and walking away from the game for a little while is pretty normal. Despite the frustration, I still find myself coming back to it later a lot of the time anyways. I didn't really write an ending. Okay, bye.